So welcome back. Is this working? Oh, that's right. I have to just project my voice. No microphone, no amplifier. So I thought that since I talked about the first part of the 9-point meditation on death just before lunch, and it's good to not just intellectualize, but meditate on it. So we'll do a meditation now. I hope we can stay awake. If you, I always have trouble after lunch keeping my mind awake and alert during meditation, but let's give it a try. So sitting up straight does help. And it also helps to not close the eyes all the way when meditating. The Tibetans say it's good to leave them open a little bit and have our eyes looking down on the place in front of us. So that helps to stay awake because there's some light coming in to your eyes. So it's not completely dark. And remember the motivation we had at the beginning this morning. So take a few moments to refresh, regenerate that motivation, altruistic motivation, thinking that you're here to benefit others, not just yourself. Of course, we benefit ourselves when we practice meditation and learn the Dharma, but it's good to expand our view and think of others and feel the wish to help others as much as we can and to help as many people as we can and incorporate them in our motivation. So thinking that you're here learning and meditating for the benefit of other beings, all living beings, if you're comfortable with that. And also recall some of the things I mentioned this morning about why we think about death, meditate on death. If we are more accepting of the reality of death, more mindful, more aware of it, it will have an effect on the way we live our life. We'll be more likely to do things that are positive and constructive, beneficial for ourselves and others, less likely to do things that are harmful, negative, create negative karma. And that will be beneficial for us here and now in this very life. And it will also benefit us for the future. If you can accept that we have other lives after this one, living this way means we'll be creating the causes for fortunate situations in future lives as well, and the ultimate goals of nirvana and enlightenment. So you can think about those reasons or other reasons of your own as to why it's useful, beneficial to be aware of and accepting of death. So this time we'll meditate on the first of the three main points in the meditation on death, which is about how death is definite, it's inevitable, it's unavoidable. So the first subpoint under that is just to contemplate that death happens to everybody. Everybody has to die. So one way you might think about that is contemplating that since human beings started living on this planet, there have been millions, maybe billions of people, human beings like ourselves, who were born, lived, and died. And we can't find an example of anyone who was born and lived and just kept living and didn't have to die. I mean, there's stories about immortal beings, but those are just fairy tales. There really is no one who is able to avoid dying. So that's one way you can think about it. Another way is just to think about people you've known in your life since the time you were born or since the time you can remember. Family members, teachers, friends, people at work, neighbors. Just think of the people you know, had interaction with, and have already passed away. Just to get a sense that death is something that happens to everybody. So now, after contemplating others who have already died, say to yourself, one day it will be my turn. Death will happen to me, and there's no way I can avoid it. And then the second point in this meditation is to contemplate how time is always passing, doesn't stand still, or no way to avoid time. So even as we're sitting here, still, quiet, meditating, time is passing. Seconds are going by, turning into minutes. Minutes go by and turn into hours. Hours go by, days go by, weeks, months, years. And as time is passing, the amount of time we have left to live is decreasing, not increasing. So it's as though we are on a moving vehicle, traveling towards death, the end of our life, getting closer and closer every day, every hour, every minute, every second. And there's no way we can change that. We can't stop time. We can't get off this vehicle. So we're moving ever closer to death. So since this is the case, we're moving towards death, and that means the amount of time we have left to live is decreasing. It's getting shorter every day, every hour. We have a limited amount of time. And there may be things we want to do while we're still alive. Some of those things may not be particularly important, vital. Hopefully you have the wish to do some spiritual work, spiritual practice, Dharma, which is all about transforming our mind, decreasing the negative, disturbing, afflictive aspects of our mind, like anger, greed, selfishness, ignorance, and so on. So gradually decreasing those and increasing the positive aspects of the mind, love, compassion, generosity, unselfish dedication to the well-being of others, wisdom, understanding the true nature of things. So gradually working on and building those up, increasing those. That's basically what Dharma is all about. Bringing about a positive transformation of our minds. And it does take time and effort to do that. So if that's something you consider important and valuable, and you want to make time for it in your life, is it wise to procrastinate, to put it off, thinking, well, right now I have my career, I have my family, I have lots of things to do. Later on I'll retire, and then I'll get serious about Dharma practice. That's great, but the problem is death doesn't wait for us to do the things we want to do. There's lots of examples of unfinished symphonies, unfinished works of art, unfinished building projects. The people died before they finished those projects. So death doesn't wait for us to finish the things we want to do. So contemplate that and see if that can give you a sense of urgency, so that if you really do want to practice Dharma, don't put it off. At least start doing some practice now. So the ideal conclusion to reach after contemplating these points is the determination to make time for Dharma, practicing Dharma in our lives, not procrastinate, not neglect it, ignore it, but at least spend some time each day or a few times a week on a regular basis doing Dharma practice, working on our mind, decreasing the negative, disturbing aspects of the mind, increasing the positive ones. So see if you can make that decision. And think of some practical ways in which you can carry that out. things you can start doing in your life. It doesn't mean you have to spend a lot of time meditating, maybe just a little bit of meditation, but also just practicing Dharma in your life, learning to be more patient, more generous, pay more attention to your karma, ethical behavior. So think of some realistic ways you can start making more time for practice in your life. Okay, so when you feel ready to come out of your meditation, you can slowly relax your position, open your eyes. I'll leave some time later for questions because I'd like to continue talking about this meditation on death. So let's move on to the second of the three main points, which are roots. They're called roots. Second root is the time of death is uncertain. So it may be that we accept that we're going to die and we feel, yeah, I know I'm going to die. It's going to happen one day. But then we may have the feeling that it's way off in the distance, somewhere way like thousands of miles away on the horizon, years and years and years away. It's not going to happen anytime soon. Have you ever noticed that? It doesn't seem like it's very close. So it's good to look at that and ask, why? Why do I think that way? One reason may be because of your health. You know, we tend to have the sense that there are people suffering from cancer or other terminal illnesses. And so we may feel, oh, they're probably going to die soon. But I don't have that kind of problem. I'm healthy. So I'm not going to die soon. Is that realistic? When you think about it, right? Because a person might have stage 4 cancer and they could live longer than someone who's younger and healthier, but they get into a car accident. I mean, there's so many things that can happen. That's one of the points we're going to look at. Yeah. So being healthy, being free of terminal illness is no guarantee that you have a long time to live. So that's like one deception that our mind may get stuck in. Another one may be age. You know, we tend to think, oh, death happens to elderly people in their 70s, 80s, 90s. Of course, there's probably a greater chance if you're that old that you're not gonna live too much longer. But is that a guarantee? Does death only happen to elderly people? No, I'm sure we all know people who have died much younger than that. Yeah. Even little kids, little children, babies, teenagers, people in their 20s, any age at all could be the age at which you die. So age has nothing to do with it. Health has nothing to do with it. So this is what we look at in the 3 points or the 3 reasons here. The first reason is that human lifespan is uncertain. So in Buddhist cosmology, they talk about other worlds, other realms. And in some of those other realms, there is a fixed lifespan. Well, I don't know if this is true, but anyway, that's what they say. So it's like everyone lives to be a certain age and then they die. But that isn't the case with us, human beings in this world. There's no fixed lifespan. I mean, they talk about life expectancy, you know, that's just an average, you know, according to a certain country, certain population, what age people live to. So then they can give you a rough idea. It's usually longer for women. Women have a longer life expectancy than men. Not sure why, but that's interesting. But even if there's a life expectancy, there's no guarantee that you're going to live that long. Yeah, that will be the age at which you die. It's just a rough estimate. So it's useful to think about and bring to mind specific examples of people you know or you've heard of who have died at different ages. I mean, there are people who live above 100. Yeah, sometimes 115, 16, 20. It's amazing. There's people who live into their 90s. But then there's lots of people who die much younger than that. Again, like even children or babies. So it's good to think of specific examples to get a sense that death can happen at any age. So whatever age you are at this point in time, I mean, I'm pretty old now, but I started doing this meditation when I was 21, I think, and it was quite powerful because, like I say, I knew kids in school, grade school, high school, who passed away. So it's very clear that any age could be the age at which you die. We just don't know. So we shouldn't let ourselves be kind of fooled by this idea that, oh, I'm going to live a long time. I won't die for many more years. We just don't know. And then the second point is our human body. Oh, what is it? Oh, there are many causes of death. Oh, yeah, this one's really interesting. So again, thinking I'm healthy, I don't have any illness, so I probably won't die soon. I guess the main cause of death is illness. I think it's heart disease is the number one cause of death. I can't remember now. Heart disease is pretty high. Cancer is pretty high. So there's certain diseases that do cause death to many people. But then there's all kinds of other things that can happen. Car accidents, plane crashes, being killed by another human being, being murdered, or in war, or in a terrorist attack, natural disasters, earthquakes, floods, fires, and so on. So any of these things, well, almost any of them. Maybe if you live in an area where there's no hurricanes, then you probably wouldn't be killed by a hurricane. What kind of things happen here? Do you have any kind of natural disasters here in this area? Fires, yeah. Same in Washington, where I live. That's, although I don't know if too many people die. It destroys a lot of trees and a lot of houses, but maybe not too many human beings. But yeah, so depending on where you live, then there are more possible natural disasters that could happen, and also creatures. Like I lived for a while in Australia, and they have certain types of spiders that are lethal. If you get bit by one of those spiders, then good chance you die. And snakes as well. Maybe there's rattlesnakes here. Rattlesnakes, yeah. So there may be certain types of creatures that could you could have an encounter with, and that could cause death. And there's also, if you pay attention to the news, there's some really interesting stories. Lama Rinpoche used to collect these stories. And I remember one that he told, it was really extraordinary. He said, I think there was a forest fire somewhere, and helicopters were picking up water from I don't know if it was from the ocean or a lake or a reservoir or whatever, but they were, scooping up the water and then dumping it on the forest fire. And so once the fire was out and they were going through and cleaning up the forest, they found the body of a scuba diver.
Oh no.
Yes, can you believe that? And it's possible, right? It's possible. Oh my God. And yeah. So yeah, I mean, you're out enjoying yourself, doing something that you find enjoyable for fun, for pleasure, and something like that could happen. Of course, there's other things that could happen, like sharks or I don't know, other kind of poisonous creatures in the ocean. But yeah, it's like you just wouldn't think that something like that could happen. And there's this other story too that I don't know. I can't remember where I heard it or read it. It was actually in a film, and some people think it was just a myth, but I heard it really did happen. There was a tourist visiting Paris and standing outside of Notre Dame Cathedral, admiring this magnificent structure. And somebody wanted to commit suicide, so they climbed up to the top and jumped from a balcony or a window or whatever, and they fell and they landed on top of the tourist. And the tourist died. The tourist was killed, but the person who jumped survived, and or probably had to go to prison for homicide. I mean, it sounds bizarre, but it is possible. And again, it's just like a situation where you're there to enjoy yourself, Here I am in Paris. Oh, it's so magnificent, so beautiful, enjoying this magnificent cathedral. So it's like the last thing you would think of is something like that. So there are like really weird, totally unexpected things that can happen in a situation where we would just never expect. So anyway, these kind of stories illustrate this point that you just never know when and how it is going to happen, sometimes in very strange ways. And also another thing they talk about at this point is even things that are normally meant to prolong life, to keep us alive and healthy, can sometimes be the cause of death. For example, food. Right? We need food to survive, and we enjoy eating food, but sometimes food can be the cause of death. Like if the food is poisoned, or people sometimes choke. I heard about somebody who choked on a potato chip. They were eating potato chips, and a potato chip went down the wrong way and got stuck in their throat, and they choked. Or sweet. This is a story. I read it in the newspaper, so I think this one is true. This guy was at a Rotary Club or Lions Club, one of those groups, and was giving a talk. And the subject of his talk was just this, like you just never know when you're going to die. So make good use of your life. Use your life well. Value your life, something like that. So he gave this very inspiring talk, and everybody was applauding. He sat down, and suddenly he fell over, was choking. So he had something in his mouth, like a cough sweet or something in his mouth. And maybe he got kind of excited, and it fell down his throat, or his windpipe or whatever, and he choked. He wasn't able to breathe, and they weren't able to get help for him. So he died. Well, hopefully he had died with that message in his mind that he had just been talking about. So he was in a good state of mind. But yeah, so there's stories like that of people die because of eating, Also medicine. Medicine is meant to keep us alive, but that can sometimes be the cause of death. If you have a reaction to the medicine, you take the wrong dose. Or there's also cases of people who go into hospital because they have one illness and they may get cured of that illness, but while they're in the hospital, they get something else because there's often these, I don't know what they're called, but things in the air. They go through the certain ventilation system, so you can actually pick up illnesses in the hospital that can cause death, or people die during surgery. So even, the whole medical scene and medical help can be the cause of death. Houses are meant to protect us from the elements, enable us to live comfortably. They sometimes collapse or burn down. So this is like the irony that even things that are meant to help us stay alive and healthy and comfortable and so on can become the cause of death. So that's the point. The point is there's many different ways that death can happen, and we just don't know which one of those will happen to us. And then the third point is, can we have the slides back? Our human body and life are very fragile. So we may feel, when we're healthy and not too old, we may feel strong and almost like we could just last forever. We can do so many things. So we may sometimes feel strong and invincible, invulnerable. That it doesn't really take that much to wipe out our strength and our energy and even cause death. I mean, look at COVID. I don't know how big a COVID virus is, but it's probably microscopic. We can't even see it with our eyes. So that tiny little virus, once it gets into the body, and I don't know exactly what goes on, I'm not medically trained, but it can lead to death. How many people have died now through COVID? Millions of people, have died as a result of that little virus. And same with cancer cells. Those are just minute, microscopic cells. But if they start developing in the body and become a cancerous tumor, then that can also cause death. So it doesn't take something huge like a tiger or a bomb to cause death. Even something very small, invisible, can cause death. Or falling. That's another thing, if you fall. I knew one nun who, she was in Delhi and she was in a bicycle rickshaw. You've been to India, so it's like a rickshaw on the back of a bicycle. It's pretty, there's no seat belts and no protection. So it is pretty risky. So she was traveling in a bicycle rickshaw and they got into an accident. She fell out and she must have hit her head, became unconscious, went into a coma, and within, I don't know, not very long, a few days, a few weeks, she passed away. So it seemed like a, not very serious fall, not very serious accident, but yeah, it just shows our body is not that strong, and it doesn't take that much for our life to come to an end. So the conclusion from this particular point, contemplating these points, is that I must start practicing now. So if we do feel strongly about doing Dharma practice, that is, we should make that a priority in our life and find time for it in our life. Again, we shouldn't put it off thinking we have a long time to live, but we should at least start now. And again, it doesn't mean you have to make major changes in your life. give up everything and go to a monastery, but you can continue with your family, your job, your work, but try to arrange your schedule so that you do have some time each day, ideally, to do some Dharma practice. So I'm going to talk later about specific things that we can do in terms of Dharma to prepare for death. And hopefully you can find at least some of the things on that list doable, things you can do. I mean, not everyone is inclined to meditation. Some people love it. Some people may find it really, really hard. And I don't think it is a must to do meditation because in my experience, having spent time in Asia with Asian Buddhists, I think not many of them meditate. Like among Tibetans, I think probably the majority of Tibetans, even though they're very, very devout Buddhists, but I don't think they meditate. Maybe some do, but most of them are just ordinary people. They have families, they have their jobs, their work, their businesses. And they go to the temple, they go to the teachings by the lamas, they do prayers, they probably do some prayers at home. And practice other things like ethics, generosity, kindness, compassion. So there's lots of things you can do, even if you're not inclined to meditation or you find meditation difficult. Yeah, so don't feel that is a must and oh, I can't do that, that's too hard. Okay, so maybe we'll do a meditation on that a little bit later. Let's go on to look at the next one. So the third main point, the third root, is what helps at the time of death. So by this time, if we have been meditating on the previous points, we probably feel a sense of urgency. Yeah, like, okay, I'm definitely going to die and I don't know when it's going to happen. And it really could happen any day, anytime. Oh, that's another thing too. People sometimes die in their sleep. Yeah, I know 2 people who died in their sleep and they weren't old. They weren't even sick. They were in their 40s and they were relatively healthy. One of them may have had a cold, but they just went to sleep and didn't wake up again. And I think they don't know what causes that. It happens to babies as well. They call it infant, what is it? Yeah, sudden infant, I don't know, anyway, something like that. So it does happen sometimes to babies that, the mother puts them down in their crib for a nap and then they just don't wake up. They don't understand why. They don't find any cause of death. So it happens to adults as well. So that's another thing, when we go to sleep at night, there's no guarantee we will wake up in the morning. And in fact, the Tibetan lamas, they advise, they say it's good that when we go to bed at night, we think, wow, I'm really fortunate. I didn't die today. I made it through another day. But I could die tonight. And then when we do wake up, if we wake up in the morning to think, wow, look at this, I'm still awake, I'm still alive, I didn't die during the night. So that's one little practice to help us keep in mind, this uncertainty of the time of death, that we just don't know when it is going to happen. In fact, maybe this would be a good time to mention, I just found this book last year. It's called Mindfully Facing Disease and Death by Bhikkhu Analayo, who's, it was published in 2016. He's a German monk and scholar, incredible scholar. He knows Pali, he knows Chinese, Tibetan, and he's done a lot of translations and also written a lot of books, mainly on Satipatthana, establishments of mindfulness, but lots of other things as well. So this book is a compilation of direct teachings given by the Buddha from the sutras about death, but also about aging, sickness, and pain, things that we might experience as we go through life, and what the Buddha advised his disciples when they were going through these experiences. So I really like reading the words of the Buddha. I find it quite nice you just feel closer connected to the Buddha. And so there's this one, kind of at the end of the book, this one sutra. And I had heard this story, but I hadn't actually seen the sutra. And so there's this, it's a practice, it's called Maranasati, I think, which means mindfulness of death, that the Buddha recommended to his disciples. So I won't read the whole thing, but just the main part. So the Buddha was in Shravasti, or Shavati in Pali, and was with some of his disciples. And the Buddha said to them, "You should cultivate the perception of death and give attention to the perception of death." And then one of the monks said to the Buddha, "I constantly cultivate giving attention to the perception of death." And the Buddha asked him, "How do you do that?" And the monk said, "At the time of giving attention to the perception of death, I have the aspiration to remain alive for 7 days and give attention to the 7 awakening factors." 7 awakening factors are 7 qualities of the mind, things like mindfulness, wisdom, concentration, that the Buddha taught to his followers to cultivate to attain nirvana. In the Tathagata's teachings, that would be of much benefit, and I will not regret passing away after that. So the monk is basically saying, he's thinking, I'm going to live for another 7 days, and during those 7 days, I'm going to pay attention to these 7 awakening factors and practice them. And the Buddha said, stop, monastic. That is not truly an undertaking of the practice of the perception of death. This is called being of a negligent nature. You're being negligent. And then other monks, in turn, give similar answers, but with different periods of time. So the first one said 7 days, the next one said 6 days, the next one said 2 days, 1 day. And each time the Buddha says, no, that's not right. That's not right. That's not, that's being negligent. Let's see, I'm trying to find the punchline here. The one who got it right. The monk that the Buddha finally said, yes, this is the way. Anyway, I think what I remember is the monk who did do it right was saying, here it is. If a monastic gives attention to the perception of death, collecting mindfulness in front with a mind that is unshaken, being mindful of the exhalation and the inhalation for the time it takes for them to go out and return, and during that period he gives attention to the 7 awakening factors, that would indeed be of much benefit in the Tathagata's teachings. Okay, so here it is. Therefore, monastic, you should give attention to the perception of death in the interval between an out-breath and an in-breath. So with each breath, basically, that's what he's saying. With each breath, not thinking I'm going to live for 7 days or 6 days, but with each breath, awareness that, when you breathe out, there's no guarantee you're going to breathe in again. Or when you breathe in, there's no guarantee you're going to breathe out again. And it's true. I mean, it really could happen. Death could happen. Something could happen really in the middle of a breath. In the middle of a breath. So that means pretty constant mindfulness of death. Now, as you probably know, the Buddha, at the Buddha's time, he and his followers were pretty much full-time meditators. They didn't do much else. They spent all their time. Once a day, they would go out with their bowls and collect food for a meal, and they'd come back, eat the meal. And then, other than that, they would be meditating, sitting in meditation or doing walking meditation. And so they were able to, and some, even now, in some countries like Thailand, there are some who practice like that. They're really full-time practitioners. But not everyone is able to do that. So I think that, you know, for us who have to do other things in our life, I think that we just pay attention to the fact that we're going to die as much as we can. And I think eventually it will become more like a default mode. We just have this awareness of the uncertainty of our life, the uncertainty of how much time we have to live before this life comes to an end. And then that will inform our actions, our decisions, our behavior, the things that we do. But the more we can have that awareness of the uncertainty of our lifespan, the more that will help us to live mindfully, carefully, ethically, compassionately, and so on and so forth. So anyway, I guess I just wanted to point out that the Buddha did put a lot of emphasis on this practice, but it does need to be done in a skillful way and in a balanced way for the purpose of empowering our practice, giving energy to our practice. Okay, so let's look at the third of the three roots, which is what is helpful at the time of death. So if we do have this sense that death could happen at any time, and we want to be prepared for it, then it's useful to contemplate what will be helpful for us at that time. That's the point here. What can help us? And so we look at three different things. First is loved ones. Our loved ones, will they be able to help us? So probably most people, when they think about the time of their death, would like to have their family nearby. Their family around. I want to die with my family around me, and giving love to each other, and they would support me, they would help me, and so on. So here we can think about that, and will they really be able to help us? For one thing, it's not definite that they will be there, because some people die away from home. Right? They're traveling and death happens, and so they're not able to be with their loved ones. Or even if you leave home to go to work in your car, you might get into a car accident and die there on the road. Your loved ones aren't there, and you're not able to get your phone out and call them and say goodbye. So it's not definite that we will have our loved ones there with us to support us, to help us when we die. Also, even if they are there, will they be able to help us? I've been in a few situations where, when I lived in Singapore for about 11 years, and I was sometimes invited to go to a hospital. Somebody was dying and wanted to have a monk or nun with them to say prayers. And in my observation, the family of people who were dying were pretty emotional, pretty upset. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know. I mean, they had their own emotions, Here's my beloved mother, father, aunt, uncle, sister, brother, whatever, who's passing away. And they're just full of sadness and grief and all kinds of emotions. So they got their own emotional things going on. And being able to give help to the person who's dying, right? They just don't know what to do, what to say, how to help them. So that's one thing to consider, that even if our family members are there, they may not be able to give us help, emotional, spiritual help. In fact, they may be the ones who need help. I remember meeting this man. He told me that he had a daughter who passed away. His daughter was only 25 years old. And he said something like, I guess she was really strong. I think she was a religious person, quite, religious, and very, very strong and very together, not emotionally falling apart at the time of death. And she gave him help. So she was the one who was dying, but he was the one who was falling apart. And she helped him. So sometimes the person who's dying can be more together, more strong than the ones who are surviving. So that's, yeah. So if you're you're in need of emotional help at the time of death, don't think that you can necessarily get that from your family members. Does that make sense? So thinking, oh, it'll be okay. My loved ones will be there. They will hold my hand. They will support me. Everything will be okay. Not definite. Not definite. Another thing too is if we have a lot of attachment to some of our family members, some of our friends and so on, that may interfere with being able to die with a clear, positive state of mind. So according to Buddhism, the best state of mind to have at the time of death is a positive state of mind, which is having faith, taking refuge, feeling love, compassion. Lama Zopa Rinpoche would always say, die with compassion. That's the best state of mind to have is compassion. And then maybe some positive aspirations about where you're going to go next. I want to be born in a good situation where I can continue to practice Dharma and benefit people and so on and so forth. So to be able to have those kinds of thoughts in our mind at the time of death. And what we should try to avoid is anger. That's not a good state of mind to have at the time of death. Also attachment, like clinging to people, clinging to things, clinging to our life, clinging to anything of this life. That's going to hang us up. That's not a good state of mind to have. And it's easy to have that if we are attached during our life. If we have a lot of attachment and clinging, and we haven't worked with that, we haven't overcome that, then that could come up at the time of death and make it hard for us to be in a positive state of mind and be able to let go. So that's something else to consider. If we have strong attachment to certain people and feel, I don't want to leave this person, I don't want to separate from this person, or what's going to happen to this person after I go, how will they carry on, then that can make our mind in a disturbed state, not clear, clean, positive, able to go easily from this life to the next one. Does that make sense? So that's something to think about and look at. Is that a possibility for me? Is there anything I will cling to at the time of death? This is a funny story they tell in the Tibetan tradition. This monk, it was a monk in a monastery, and he was dying. He was on his deathbed. And he was supposed to die. I mean, it was like he was kind of hanging on, like they expected him to die, but he just kept hanging on. And his teacher, who must have had some clairvoyant ability, understood why this monk was hanging on. So he had a cup of tea on the table next to his bed, butter tea. Tibetans love their butter tea. So there was a cup of butter tea on his table. And so he was hung up with that. So the teachers sent a message saying, there's better butter tea in Tushita heaven That's where Maitreya is. And so as soon as the monk heard that, he realized, oh, yeah, I'm attached to my butter tea. So he let go and left. So hopefully he got to enjoy that better butter tea. Anyway, it's kind of a joke. But yeah, so we can get hung up on the slightest thing, cup of tea. So yeah, so that can give us insight into the importance of working on decreasing our attachment and also clearing up any other unfinished business that we may have with people. Like if there's some bad feelings, you know, resentment or guilt, or maybe we want to apologize to people. I just earlier, was it last year? Yeah, last year I was teaching a course on this topic, and it was a Zoom course, and this one young woman said her father was actually in the process of dying at that time, and she really wanted to help him, so she was attending this course to learn how to help her father. And then I heard from her later. She wrote in and she said that her father did all these amazing things before he died. He called up a brother that they'd had a quarrel years and years ago, and they weren't on very good terms. He called him up and apologized, and he did all these things to sort of clear up business, unfinished business with people. And I guess he was in a really positive state of mind. So that's really good to do, because otherwise that can be a sticking point in your mind. In fact, it's good to do that as soon as possible. Don't wait. Don't wait till the end of your life, because you just never know when it's going to happen. And I heard this one story. One woman told me this story of it was someone else that she knew. His family was a mother, father, and a son. And the father and the son were leaving home to go on a fishing trip. And just before they left, the mother and the son had an argument. They were angry at each other. And then the son left. There was still this anger between them. And then on the fishing trip, something happened. There was an accident and the son died. So I think we can imagine how awful the mother must have felt, because the last interaction she had with her son was an angry one. And they didn't have a chance to make up, kiss and make up and say, I love you, and clear up that argument. So I think she must have felt just terrible that she didn't have the chance to do that before the son died. So that's something that could happen to any of us, with any of our friends or family. When we say goodbye, we always expect we're going to see them again, but there's no guarantee of that. So if we have that awareness of the uncertainty of the time of death, that will really help us to not let those kind of problems drag on and really clear them up as quickly as we can. Otherwise, we may not have the opportunity to do that. Okay, so yeah, this is a big issue. Our relationships with others, family and friends. And we probably all have a lot of work to do. I mean, this one was really helpful for me, because I didn't have such good relations with my parents, as many of us. So I had kind of a lot of anger and resentment towards them from my early years. And learning the Buddhist teachings and the meditations and so on really gave me a strong sense that I wanted to clear up the problems with my parents. And so over the years, I worked on that and tried to appreciate them and love them and so on. And I'm really grateful that I was able to do that before they passed away. Because again, if they had, one or both of them had passed away before I had a chance to do that, I think I would have suffered a lot from regret. So I'm really, really grateful for the Buddhist teachings and these kind of meditations to help me do that. So by the time they did pass away, it was clear. The relationship was clear, and I was able to really love them and express that to them. And Yeah, there was like no unfinished business there to hang on to. Okay, number 2, the second point is wealth and possessions. So our property, whatever you have, house, money, and so on and so on. So this is something that people tend to take refuge in during their life. You know, it's nice to have a place to live and all these things and so on. Can they help us at the end of our life? Can our wealth, our possessions help us at that time? So again, the saying, you can't take it with you, right? However much money you have, however many possessions you have, they all have to be left behind when we die. Not even a cent of our money can go with us. And so it's good to contemplate that now so that we start to work on our attachment, decrease our attachment, be prepared that we will have to leave all these things behind. It's good to make a will. Another reason for making a will is because then you kind of already at least partially cut your attachment. You know, you thought about, I'm not going to have this forever. I want this to go to this person and that person and so on and so forth. So that kind of gives some ease in the mind. But even then, there may be some attachment left. So it's good to notice that, be aware of that, work on that. Because otherwise that attachment, if it comes up at the time of death, could be even for a cup of tea. It could be a cause of getting stuck in the process of dying. And then the third point is our body. So while we are alive, we use our body to do all kinds of fun things and pleasurable things. And of course, it is very useful. We can do lots of things with our body, beneficial things, Dharma practice, helping others, and so on. But we, again, have to leave it behind when we die. And I think attachment to the body is something kind of subtle. We may think, I'm not attached to my body. But it may be there. We probably are attached to our body, but without realizing it. I mean, when you think about it, we're with our body 24 hours a day. We're usually not with our family and friends 24 hours a day, and our house and our possessions 24 hours a day. But this body is with us 24/7, every second. Unless you have the ability to do astral travel, you can go out of your body and go somewhere else. But I don't know, I've never had that experience. But yeah, so our body is such a constant companion that we may not be aware of our attachment to it, but there probably is attachment. And so that can be problematic at the time of death if we're attached to our body and we don't want to leave our body. So it's and it's not going to be helpful for us. We can't rely on our body to stop us from dying or to help us as we're dying. And in fact, it could become problematic if there's pain, there's the inability to do things. You know, sometimes people get so weak they can't even, get a drink for themselves. They can't go to the bathroom by themselves. They can't feed themselves and so on. So our body could actually become a problem, cause of a lot of suffering at the time of death. And so it's helpful to think about that, to contemplate that, to start working on overcoming the attachment to our bodies. And I love this saying in the Tibetan tradition about the body being a guest house and our mind staying in the body temporarily in the way that a traveler will stay in a hotel room, for a few nights or maybe a few weeks and then move on. So I find that a really helpful image or analogy. to take care of the body. Of course, we need to take care of the body, but not overdo it, not spend too much time and energy taking care of our body, fussing with it. And yeah, so awareness that we're going to leave this body at some point, like a traveler moving on to another body. And that can really help to decrease attachment to the body and identification with the body. And also awareness that, yeah, it's not permanent. I'm not going to be with this body forever. And so the point of these is to just realize that the things we use in our life, or the things we rely on in our life for happiness, for positive experiences, won't be helpful at the time of death, because we have to leave them all behind. They all have to be left behind. So what can help us at that time? Now, ideally, one already knows about Dharma and the benefits of Dharma, and the meaning of Dharma. And so one would think, well, what can help me at that time is Dharma. So the way that Dharma helps us at that time, one is, like I mentioned earlier, the real essence of Dharma practice is working on the mind, decreasing our negative, afflictive emotions like anger and so on, learning how to at least manage them. If we can't be completely free of them, at least we know how to manage them. And learning how to increase positive states of mind, like love, compassion, and so on. So if we have trained in those methods, we've practiced those methods during our life, so we know how to, manage our anger and how to generate positive states of mind, then we'll be able to do that at the time of death. We'll be able to get ourselves into a good state of mind, overcome negative states of mind. So that's one way Dharma helps us at the time of death. Another way is because of the Buddhist belief in rebirth, reincarnation. Death is not a final end, but a gateway to another life. And it's said that one of the main factors determining our next life, where we're born, the circumstances of our birth, and so on, is the state of mind we have at the time of death. That's like a really crucial state of mind, because by the time we get to the end of our life, we have a lot of karma that we've created, not only in this life, but also we're carrying karma from past lives as well. We have lots of karmic seeds, and some of them are good karma, some of them are not good karma, some of them may be very negative karma. So one of those karmic seeds is going to pop up and be the cause for the next rebirth. And we want to make sure that's a good karmic seed, not a bad one. And so the state of mind at the time of death will affect that. If we're in a negative state of mind, if we're angry, we're clinging, attached, fearful. So if our mind is in a disturbed state, then that is the state of mind in which one of our negative karmic seeds will come up and propel us into the next life, which means not a good situation. So we don't want that to happen. We want to be in a good state of mind with some kind of positive thoughts and feelings. That will be the right state of mind for a good karmic seed, one of our good karmas, to come to the surface and ripen and be the cause for our next rebirth. So we need to, during our life, we need to try to create as much good karma as we can, try to avoid creating negative karma as much as we can, and do purification of negative karma. So during our life, if we try to build up a good stock of good karma and reduce our stock of negative karma, then that will be helpful. But also the state of mind at the time of death will be an important factor determining the next rebirth. So the best scenario for our mind at the time of death is to be in a positive state of mind. I'll talk more probably tomorrow. What time do we end today? 3:30. Okay, so we have a bit more time. Yeah. So I'll talk more about specific practices, methods we can use during our life to have a greater chance of positive state of mind at the time of death, and then a fortunate rebirth after this life. So the conclusion for this third point is, I must practice purely, free of worldly attachment and aversion. So what that means is seeing how important it is to practice Dharma, and also for our Dharma practice to be pure. That mainly means free of worldly concerns. Like you may have heard of the 8 worldly concerns, the 8 worldly dharmas. So these are like 4 pairs of opposites that we can get hung up on. One is gain and loss, wanting material gain, not wanting to lose money or miss out on money. And praise and blame, wanting praise, not wanting to be criticized or blamed. Pleasant sense pleasures, wanting those, and wanting to avoid unpleasant, painful experiences. And then the last pair is fame or reputation, wanting to be well known and admired, not wanting to be unknown or have a bad reputation. So it's like 4 pairs of opposites that we all tend to be concerned about. And these can influence our behavior, our actions. And unfortunately, they can also creep into our Dharma practice. So, for example, even if we are engaging in spiritual practice, there may be this wish for gain, material gain. Maybe I've heard people talk about this, learn Dharma and become a meditation teacher and start charging money, making a lot of money. I mean, you can. It's possible. Some people charge lots of money for Dharma weekends, Dharma seminars, and so on. So that would not be correct. That's an example of polluted Dharma. Practicing Dharma, learning Dharma, practicing Dharma, not for the right reason, which is transforming your mind and aiming for better experiences in the future, but just material gain in this life. Or fame. That's very easy to get into. Where you can become rich and famous through Dharma. So it's very tempting, these kind of things. I remember hearing about this one Christian televangelist whose name I don't remember. It's probably better I don't remember. But he was very famous, very popular, had millions of followers, and was very wealthy, people sending in money. And then he did something wrong. He didn't pay his taxes, or he was some kind of fraud, ended up, being tried, and I think spent some time in jail. And when I read an article about this, a friend of his said something, what was it? It was very nice. He said, in the beginning, he loved people and used money. In the end, he loved money and used people. So I think it's so easy for that to happen. When you do start getting into more, more people attracted to you, more money coming in, that, we already have these tendencies of being attached to money and being attached to fame and so on. So it's so easy to slip into that and maybe find justification for it. But, and there's, I think in all religions, there's stories. The Dalai Lama talks about this. He talks about Geshis. A Geshe is someone who's, it's like a professor. They study many, many years and passed exams, and then they're very knowledgeable and qualified to teach. So he says, there's some Geshis who graduate from the monastic universities in India, and then they want to go to the West, or they want to go to Taiwan. Not for the right reasons, because that's where the money is. So he speaks in public about that. So it must be that there are such cases of that, and I scold him. That's not right. Yeah, so how did I get off on that? Yeah, so Dharma practice needs to be done purely with the right reason, the right motivation, not with worldly concerns, worldly attachment. And again, contemplating death is so helpful for that. We realize, I have to leave it all behind. It's not going to help me at the time of death. It's not going to help me for the next life. And then my Dharma becomes polluted. My Dharma practice is polluted, not pure. So that's the 9-point death meditation. Are there any questions? I've been talking for quite a while. Yeah.
Is there a practice? I don't know. I'm asking because I don't know. A practice in slipping out of your body without, not, just being able to, before you go to sleep, and practice I did. That I could just practice. I've been able to do it a little bit, but not much. Slip out of my body and not be attached to being here. As a practice, for getting ready to die.
So in case people online didn't hear, she's asking if there's a practice for slipping out of your body, like before going to sleep at night, and that way being less attached to your body. I don't think I've heard of a practice in the Tibetan tradition. There may be. I don't know all the different practices because there's also different traditions. So I'm mainly in the Gelugpa tradition, so maybe some of the other traditions have such practices. And I mean, there are people who sometimes just spontaneously have out-of-body experiences, and this can sometimes happen at night. They, consciousness leaving their body and going out, and they're able to have lucid dreams as well, having awareness that they are asleep and dreaming, so that they know that what's going on isn't real. So I think there are practices like that. There's what they call dream yoga. It's not something I've learned in practice. I think it's more in the Nyingma tradition. But the Nyingma dream yoga. Yeah. So yeah, I haven't come across such a practice, but it could be there, and I just haven't learned it.
So it's not so much about understanding the process as much as it is doing things now to help the, you know what I mean? It's not so much about learning, okay, the stages and how it goes and what to do and what to think at this time. It's more about just doing things in a more positive way while you are living, right?
Well, so far what I've been talking about is, this is within the context of the Lam the stages of the path to enlightenment. The emphasis is on using awareness of death to live life in a beneficial way, in a positive way, avoid negative actions as much as we can, create positive actions and as much as we can, and so on. And the thing about the stages of dying, that actually isn't included in the Lam Rim. It's included, you find that kind of information in Tantra, Vajrayana Buddhism, which is, I mean, ideally you've studied and practiced and you're really familiar with the Lam Rim first before you get into Tantric practice. And in the context of Tantra, the reason for learning about the stages, there's 8 stages of dying, is to prepare, like Rinpoche, So when you are actually dying, you're able to be aware of these stages as they're happening. You maintain awareness. And then with the 8th stage, you have the clear light experience. Then you can recognize that. Because I guess most people, everybody goes through those stages in the clear light, but most are just totally unaware of what's going on. So they can't really make any beneficial use of it. But a tantric yogi is prepared for that. So when they do have they get to that point of the clear light stage, they can recognize that clear light mind and then remember emptiness. So ideally, you already have an understanding of emptiness. So you use that mind to meditate on emptiness. They say that's a very powerful mind that can realize emptiness. So that's the real purpose for learning about the 8 stages. But many teachers, including His Holiness and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, do talk about the 8 stages of dying at this point in the Lam Rim. I mean, I think it is useful to have some idea. One reason it can be useful is just to be more prepared. Like, I think one reason people might be so afraid of death is because they don't know what's going to happen. Like, it's a big unknown. Nobody comes back to tell us what it was like. So it's like, we see all these people dying, and what happens to them? Where do they go? What is it like? So knowing, I mean, if you can believe the yogis who are aware of these 8 stages and can talk about it, then just knowing, oh, this is what's going to happen, and be a little bit prepared for it, that might take away some of the fear. And it can also be helpful with others who are dying, to know that they are going through these stages, because sometimes it can take several days. Some friends long ago in Vajrapani Institute in California, one of the members of that community passed away. A woman, she died of cancer, and she was at home, and the members of the community were taking turns staying with her 24/7. So there was always somebody with her. And so one of those people told me that from the time she stopped breathing, it was, I think, 3 days. It was 3 days before they saw the signs of that the consciousness had left. And he said his experience was, he felt she was still there, even though there was no breathing, no movement. She was like dead, but he felt she wasn't really dead. She was still there. And then once the signs occur, like blood coming out of the nose, he said you could definitely feel, now she's gone. And also the body doesn't start to smell. Well, the consciousness is still there in the body. It doesn't smell, doesn't have a bad odor. So if you have an awareness of these 8 stages, and you are in that kind of situation where you're with somebody who's dying, and you have the ability to just leave the body undisturbed until the signs appear, then that's helpful. Otherwise, it's not good to disturb the body while the mind is still present. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
I did have another question too. Have you heard anything about in the West where if the cause of death is undetermined, that there's like a mandatory autopsy? Did you hear that? Or someone was telling me that the other day. I didn't know if it was true. If they don't know why, it's like a law to do an autopsy. And I was just wondering if you...
I haven't heard.
I'm pretty sure that those laws on autopsy are state specific. There's no federal law on it.
Okay.
Each state has its own law as to what constitutes the need for an autopsy or not.
Mm-hmm.
I did wonder about that recently. One nun, Venerable Thupten Pemo, who was living in Santa Cruz, she passed away in her apartment, and they're not really sure when she passed away because they didn't find the body right away. So she may have been there for a couple of days. And I kind of did wonder if they were going to do an autopsy to determine the cause of death, but I didn't hear any news about that. So yeah, I guess it is according to the state, whether that is a law or not. I wonder if it also has to do if there's any suspicious circumstances, they see blood on the floor and a knife and, signs of struggle, then I don't know. I have no idea. I haven't had much experience with that. Well, how about if we do another meditation on these points? So we did the first root, the death is definite. So let's do a meditation on the second one. If you feel like standing up, I don't want to have a break because we're just going to stop in a half an hour. But if you feel like standing up, stretching, that could be helpful. Okay, so make yourselves comfortable. Try to keep your back straight if you can. I say if you can because some people may have issues with their back and are not able to sit up straight. So just find whatever position works best for you. But if you can, it's good to keep the back straight, to have the energy flowing in the best way and be able to stay awake and alert. And also, if you think there's a chance you might become sleepy, don't close the eyes all the way, but leave them open a little so there's light coming in, and that can help you to stay awake. And then just take a few minutes to settle the mind down. Be aware of the breath coming in or going out. Bring the mind back to the breath anytime it wanders away. And put aside other thoughts that are not related to what we're doing here. You can always pick up those thoughts later if you need to. But just say to them, not now, I'm busy, I'm meditating. So earlier we meditated on the certainty of death, the inevitability of death, that everyone has to die, and it's something we can't avoid. We can't just go on living forever. So that's relatively easy to understand, to accept. Yes, one day I'm going to die. I know that, I accept that. But check to see what sense you have about that in terms of time. Do you have the sense that it could happen any day, any moment, or if it's something far away and you don't really have to think about it right now? And one way we can get an idea of that is by thinking about our plans. We tend to have plans, or at least dreams, hopes, expectations about things we're going to do, or things that are going to happen. Next week I'm going to do this, and next month I'm going to do that, and next year I'm going to do that, and so on. And if we check, we might have the sense that these things are definitely going to happen. I'm definitely going to do those things. But is it definite? So the truth is, the only thing that is definitely going to happen is death. Everything else is uncertain. But we usually don't make plans for death. We make plans for all kinds of other things that may not happen, but we don't make plans for death, which is the only thing that will definitely happen. So let's think about the points under this topic of the uncertainty of the time of death. The first is there's no certainty about human lifespan or human life expectancy. So human beings die at all different times in their life, at all different ages. So bring to mind examples of that. People you know, people you've heard of, friends, neighbors, family members, who've died at different ages, at different stages of their life, anywhere from infants, newborn infants, all the way up to people in their 90s or even above 100. Just get an idea of how people die at all different ages. So when it comes to ourself, me, can we have any certainty about how old we will be when death happens to us? And then the second point is that there are many ways that death can happen. Illness is one, but there's accidents and even things that we rely on for our health, for our life, like eating food or taking medicine, can sometimes become the cause of death. So think of some examples of maybe people you know or people you've heard of, stories you may have read in the newspaper about different ways death happens to people, to get a sense of how we just don't know what will happen to us, how death will happen to us. Then the third point is that our body and life may appear strong and as if they could go on for a really long time and nothing could harm us or take away our life, but that's an illusion. It doesn't really take much. For example, a virus or cancer cells, they're so tiny we have to use a microscope to see them. But if they're in our body and actively harming our body, then in a short time, our life could come to an end. You could think of other examples as well, of people who fall in a certain way or encounter some other kind of object that causes death. So just to get a sense that our body and our life are not as strong as they may appear to be. And in a very short time, they could come to an end. So the ideal conclusion to come to after contemplating these points is, since we don't really know how much longer we have to live, if we do see the value of some kind of Dharma practice, some kind of spiritual practice, then it wouldn't be wise to procrastinate, to put it off to some time in the future, which may not happen. And instead, we should really at least start doing some of that Dharma practice now. It's okay. When you feel ready to end your meditation, you can change your position, open your eyes. I remembered another story Lama Zopa Rinpoche would tell about, I think it's more to do with the third point about the body being fragile. He said in the early days, probably the late 60s, early 70s, when Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa were teaching Western people in Nepal, most of the people were hippies. And there was one young man from Europe who didn't like wearing shoes. He would walk around barefoot. And one time he stepped on a thorn. He got a thorn in his foot and didn't bother about it. It got infected, and I guess he didn't go to the doctor. And the infection eventually spread into his body, and he died. So that's like an example of something so small, so minor, being a cause of death. A thorn. So, yeah. I think about bullets as well. I mean, bullets can be really, really tiny. But if they go into certain parts of the body, especially the brain or the heart, very quickly the body, the life is destroyed. So, yeah, for me, it's felt helpful to think about that it really doesn't take that much for this life to come to an end. So we'll stop here, I think, and dedicate. Any last questions before we end? Any burning questions? Because I thought we could read. What we'll do dedication of our merit from what we did today, and I thought we could also read this prayer that was composed by Khadro-la for the quick return of Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, so we can dedicate our merit to that as well. So you have it coming up. Okay, so we'll start with the usual dedication prayers. And then instead of reading the prayer for the long life of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, which is on this slide, we'll read the other one, which will be on another slide, I believe. Still have trouble with this. Okay, so think of all the positive energy we've created today coming together and having an altruistic motivation, a positive motivation, and spending this time listening, thinking about, discussing, and meditating on these teachings, which are from the Lamrim, the path to enlightenment, very, very beneficial for transforming our mind. So feel that we definitely created merit, positive energy. This is the cause of happiness. It's the cause of spiritual growth towards enlightenment. So let's share that merit with all other living beings, wishing that it will be the cause for everyone to follow this path leading out of suffering and the causes of suffering, leading to happiness and its causes, and finally leading to full enlightenment, Buddhahood. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, that has not arisen, arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Long life prayer for the Dalai Lama. And when we pray for the long life of the Dalai Lama, we can also think of all other teachers, your own personal teachers, Geshe Sherab, Geshe Tenzin Zopa, and so on. So we can include all of them, wishing all of them to live a very long time and continue teaching the Dharma. Incomparably kind and supreme, Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-fulfilling, wish-granting jewel, source of every benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Is it possible to make it bigger? Can you read that? Yeah, just try to make the prayer bigger. I don't think we need the pictures so much, but the prayer larger. Okay, so again, this is written by Khadro-la, very special woman. Lama, you know, Lama, you know. I beg you to listen to me, gentle root Lama. I appeal to you with a sudden, desperate request. Do not deprive us of your compassionate refuge. Lama, you are the blessings of the Buddhas of the 3 times, even though you are now in the great pervasive bliss of the unobstructed sphere of clear light. It is now that we need your great compassion. Quickly emanate the supreme body of the transcendental wisdom emanation from the various emanations of the dance of the great compassion of the Supreme Mind. Arise, rise, return from the sphere of the Dharmakaya. I invoke you, I invite you, I invoke you for the sake of beings. Do not remain in the pure land of Dakini and other pure lands. Please return at once to make the scriptural and realization teachings flourish for the sentient beings of the world to the south. Come back right away because the desperate beings are kind and are desperately calling you. They want to see you. They want to be blessed in body, speech, and mind. We are the sentient beings hallucinated and confused by the conception of ignorance in the sphere of the luminous emptiness of the 3 supreme bodies. We confess the samayas that we have degenerated. Let there be the auspiciousness of emptiness and compassion, the supreme auspiciousness of all auspiciousness. Let there be the auspiciousness of the quick meeting of the disciple and the Lama. By the power of the truth of unchanging reality, may the perfect reincarnation quickly appear. I, the Dakini, with pure faith, in sorrow and weeping in despair, due to the blessings of the 3 roots, may the wishes of this beggar be fulfilled. Object, subject, and action in the sphere of the reality of luminosity and bliss. Ah. Right? Ah. Okay, so this is a provisional translation. They did it quickly and it needs to be checked and maybe changed, but maybe by tomorrow we'll have the translation of the Dalai Lama's prayer. That will be really wonderful to read what he wrote. It's in Tibetan if you can read Tibetan. Okay, so we'll stop there and thank you. Thank you for coming and hope to see you tomorrow. And don't completely forget what you learned here today. I hope we'll all still be here tomorrow, but there's no guarantee.